do you find that as a woman you struggle and sometimes you have to operate in that masculine energy, or do you stay in your feminine energy?
I mean, I think it's a combination. I think there's a nice balance between it. I think as a leader, I definitely lead in more to the divine feminine
Yeah.
and emotional intelligence. I think for me, early on, I don't think I leaned necessarily into my masculine energy.
As you know, we use this platform to share stories of resilience. And today I have a very special guest. Hey everybody, it's Sally Allen, your podcast host again of the Sally Allen podcast. Thank you for being here. And today we have an amazing, incredible guest. Her name is Anika Howard. And Anika Howard is the president and CEO of WONDR NATION. I have been, she doesn't know this, but I have been stalking her for about a year now. we we sit on a committee together for global gaming women, but I've been following her on LinkedIn and I am so impressed by who she is, how she conducts herself, and I knew that I wanted to get to know her. So not only have I asked her to be on my podcast, I also said, "Hey, are you going to be my mentor?" And thank goodness she said yes. So I want to welcome my mentor, my friend, and this incredible woman, Anika Howard, to the Sally Allen podcast. Welcome, Anika. So tell us about your first job, Anika. How was your first job? When you got out of college, you got into this first job. What I know you shared a little bit with me and I thought it was funny, but tell us about your first job.
I got tapped to move to Las Vegas and to take on the responsibility of really the first iteration of a corporate Harris.com, Caesars.com website. And so a big piece of what I was responsible for fresh out of college was to go and work with all of these very seasoned senior leaders within the casino and consolidate and tell them that what you're doing, I'm taking away and kind of doing something else.
Oh my gosh.
And I and I think part of it is that uh, when you're young, you don't really, you're in many cases fearless. And so
Okay.
I look back now and I was like, wow, that was a big responsibility to give a 20 something year old person for $1 billion organization, just all kind of shiny penny. And the gentleman turns around and he looks me up and down and he tells me, huh, how old are you? I think I have ties older than you. And I'm like,
Yeah.
great. This is just fantastic.
Mm.
I leave, I close the door, I knock on it again, and I was like, hi,
Oh,
my name
did
is,
you?
and I kind of start over. He gets a kick out of it, and we kind of continue from there.
Uh-huh.
And so part of it, I think, in that process, when you can't really take yourself too seriously, and you also have
Yeah.
to understand and listen, and kind of perspective, and a big part of what I've learned through the process is, in many cases, you just need to listen more than you speak.
Mm.
um,
That's
and
important.
it's really to get to the core understanding. And we had kind of a great friendship that
Yeah.
that ensued. His nickname for me was Dorothy because he felt like corporate was Oz, and they sent me they sent me from Oz.
I love
so
that
uh,
story. Thank you for sharing it
so
again.
but it was
Yeah.
great, and so I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things too that really it goes back to mindset. Like how do you kind of take on and receive experiences that you put in? Because I could have been, oh my God, this is horrible. He's mean to
Yeah.
me, all these
Yeah.
types of things. And it could have been a very, very different experience for me. But I chose to kind of lean into it and said, okay, this is what this is. Let's try a different approach.
I love that. And you touched on something, a question I was going to ask you, but I'd like to dig into that a little bit more because I feel your resiliency obviously you share about your parents and the empowerment, right? Your parents has empowered you so much. So I feel like some of your resiliency came from that. But talk to
Yeah.
us a little bit more about that, because a lot of young people, they walk into work and they're crushed so easily. Something like that would have crushed a, a normal person. You were not crushed. You went back out. That was so impressive. You went back out and you did a reset. You knocked again on the door and you went in. You were fearless. I want to know about that mindset and what drives that resilient mindset.
And so, I mean, I think part of it is, and it can be a whole separate session. I think a big part of what my parents instilled in me, I think that's a big part. Part of it is upbringing. Part of it is just I've always had this commitment to myself that I want to make a difference, and I want to kind of understand and really get to the core. Like, I like to dig. I don't like to just take things at face value. I want to understand the why behind it, because, and I think I also from I think a big part of what I did growing up was kind of this community involvement and community outreach and volunteerism. And I think when you do that, you kind of realize that there are layers to people. And so what
Mm-hmm.
you see is never kind of the core of it. That's kind of the representative that people are showing you. But everyone has so many things and so many layers and are so complex. And so you can't, um, I think when you look at yourself and you realize that you're not just one thing or one dimensional. And so it's just a safe bet that the people that you work with are not, and you have to just meet people where they are. And I really have always felt that way. And so I try to always find common ground. um, I listen and take in and observe
Yeah.
a lot, and then I really try to act based on that, as opposed to, and sometimes it's a harder
Yeah.
and a very disciplined way to be.
Yeah.
But I've learned that when I don't do that, I always I always regret it, and always kind of think about, how could I have done that different? What are things that I would change about the interaction or decision that I've made?
Yeah. And what I'm hearing you say is almost like you take yourself out of the picture. It's not really about you, but it's about that person that you're talking to. And if you listen long and hard enough, you will actually hear what they're trying to say.
Yes, listen to understand and not to respond. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, and it's hard because sometimes I find myself doing that, and you're kind of listening, and you already have the answer and what you want to say before the question is even had. And sometimes my brain works that fast and I already know, but I know, and I realize, and I see that when that's happening, that I have to temper myself and have to say, no, you need to listen, you need to understand, you need to hear kind of the full pieces of it, because you'll miss something if you don't.
Yeah. So, what is your biggest challenge so far in your career?
And so I've been thinking about this, and I think one of the things that when I think about a challenging time in my career, and it's kind of fortunate because I think we all had this shared collective experience during COVID of things that were you had so many things converging at once, and everyone's COVID experience was a little bit different. And so when I look at just kind of before
Okay.
COVID and after COVID, that transitional period for me was a very challenging time for a number of reasons, as just as a human being,
Yeah.
and then as a leader, and also being in gaming. And so, you know, we all know how impacted hospitality was during that time. And for me, it had this duality of experiences because I worked for a tribe. With WONDR Nation, it's owned by the Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation.
Mhm.
And at that time, I was still on the Foxwoods side. And when the decision was made to shutter the casino, there was a decision also to have a core set of people stay on. So I was part of that core team that was saying that, okay, there's still some basic things that need to happen, communications that need to happen to be part of it. So part of it is like you're part of this small group. You know all the challenges and everything that your team is going through, and you have to let your team go.
Mm,
And you're still trying to stay connected and trying to do some of those pieces on that. You do have a sense of guilt that, you are a little bit protected in ways that the majority of everyone is not. And so, but it becomes very insulated, and it was still a very lonely experience. And so, I think about that a lot in terms of how kind of all the things that we needed to get done. So it kept me very, very busy, but it also but then you layer on George Floyd, and you layer on
mm.
all of these other things that are happening around it, and you're layering on the politics, and you're
Oh, yeah.
layering on just kind of still connecting with the team and kind of understanding their struggle, and that's not even kind of bringing into just the devastation that COVID caused and created in families within the organization, and just kind of the loss of life. And so you have all of these things, and you still have to stay focused. You still have to do things that are driving revenue. You have to still things that are pulling it in. So it was a very challenging time for me in terms of just managing all of these dynamics. And it was this is kind of, I feel like, a shared experience, because so many people were in a similar situation
Mm.
to the same thing.
Yeah, and I feel like you have to show strength in front of your team, but were there
Yeah.
times when you were being vulnerable also in front of your team?
And so I think that's part of the whole thing. I don't think I was as vulnerable in terms and in front of my team, because I almost felt like I couldn't, because there were so many things that were unknown. Like,
Mm.
we, kind of, they wanted to know, like, if the casino was going to open back up, what all these other things that need to happen. And I felt like I couldn't fall apart because that would
Yeah.
freak them out even worse
Right, right.
than that. But there were points that, I when I got off the phone and when I was kind of alone, that I was just like in tears, and
Yeah.
it was just so overwhelming in so many different things. But it was like, okay, now kind of suck it up and get it back in and put your game face on. And so, and I
Yeah.
do feel like from that standpoint, I connected with a group of friends, and we would kind of try to, since everyone was stuck at home,
Yeah.
and you didn't have that interaction and pieces together. And so, since I was and just trying to check in and connect with people and do things like that, and so that there were people that I were vulnerable with. But I think from a work perspective, I didn't feel like I had the luxury to do it, because there were so many people that were in worse or different situations than I was, that I felt
Yeah.
like I almost like I wasn't entitled to that.
Yeah, yeah.
um, Crazy feeling, but yeah. So I think part of that was kind of dynamic, kind of came in. I think about that a little bit more when I go back and kind of thinking about redo, and I think there was probably opportunity to lean into that, because that's where I'm best, and just kind of allow people to sit with it, and to facilitate some of those conversations. And so I do think about that, like, what are some of the things that we could have done differently? Like, we
Mhm.
did a lot of things where I worked with, where we had kind of all these different programmings, all these different things to try to provide support both for our players, our customers, and our team members.
Yeah.
But like, I was more of a facilitator, as opposed of kind of saying, I want to make sure you have all this information, as opposed to kind of me kind of, you know, bringing that emotion into it.
Yeah.
And so I think about that. You just
Yeah.
never know what the right thing is.
Yeah, and I feel, looking back, there's a time and place to be vulnerable. And when people
Yeah.
are all fearful and they're fearful for their jobs,
I think they needed
yeah,
the strength. They
they
needed
need
to
the
know,
strength.
okay, like,
Yeah.
because if they were like, if I fell apart, they're like, "Oh Lord."
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't the
Yeah,
time. That wasn't the time to be
yeah,
vulnerable as a leader,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
You got to
I feel like
stay
some of those
strong.
things, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they needed to see strength and know there's a pillar there to support them. I like that a lot. So, I wanted to ask you on your path to CEO, did you see that coming? Was it a surprise? And when you finally got it, what was that feeling like?
It was a really good feeling, and so it like I have always been entrepreneur at heart. Like for a time, I did have my own consultancy, and have always kind of been on this path. When I moved to Connecticut and came to Foxwoods, did I envision that I would once be kind of now leading kind of their interactive business as CEO? I did not. But I think when the tribe tapped me shortly after COVID to start thinking about like um, what they could do to diversify beyond kind of casino and physical experiences, so that if something like this would happen again, or even just so they have an opportunity to diversify, and this is across the board. And so this was one of the things that they did. One, I felt like this great sense of honor, but and responsibility to bring it in.
Hmm.
And I really spent a lot of time doing this. And so for me, it was this duality of it. So, because it wasn't just tapping me for CEO, but like, you are creating this company from scratch. So they
Wow.
weren't giving me a company. They're like, we want you to create a company for us and lead it.
Wow.
And so I do sometimes have this sense of I'm like, wow, we did this.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
remembering when it was really just kind of me mapping out things on like on almost kind of in a journal perspective, kind of writing out, okay, here the vision, and kind of doing that and the iterative process to kind of pull this together from it being in my head
Yeah. Yeah.
and sharing it, and to it actually coming to life, and then building the brand and all the pieces of it. So for me, it was this whole process of, I had the opportunity to just to work with the tribe to create this and to build the team to support it. And I'm really happy to say that we were revenue positive year one, and now even in kind of this period of time, we're actively contributing to kind of to the infrastructure for the tribe. And so that's really important because it's doing the work that it intended we set out to do. And so that's a major accomplishment. But I don't think I didn't have this on my bingo card for doing this, but it's always something that I felt like I could do.
Yeah, yeah. So my prior guest that I had, we were talking about masculine energy, and I don't see this in you, but I have to ask, being a woman in the workplace and being at such an elevated um, level, do you find that as a woman you struggle and sometimes you have to operate in that masculine energy, or do you stay in your feminine energy?
I mean, I think it's a combination. And I think when we kind of think masculine and feminine energy, I think we kind of think of it in terms of, I think there's a nice balance between it. I think
Mhm.
as a leader, I definitely lead in more to the divine feminine
Yeah,
and
yes.
emotional intelligence and connecting with people, and kind of the things that I think people find in femininity, but really are being kind of those key leadership qualities that are very, very important in inspiring and connecting and creating an inclusive environment. So I think for me, early on, I I think early on, I don't think I leaned necessarily into my masculine energy, but I felt like I used myself a little
Yeah.
bit. And I think as the more I became me, the more I just kind of looked at different things differently. I think I kind of the more of me I brought into the
Yeah, yeah.
role, I think that the happier and the more successful I became. And I remember, and this is a crazy thing because we'll talk here for a minute. I remember when I made the decision that I was going to do natural and I was gonna lean in to that. That was a big and scary decision
Right.
for me. But it was something that it was important for me because I was having conversations with my nieces, and and they were struggling with kind of what is beautiful, what
Mm,
is acceptable, and kind of their hair and all pieces on it. And I realized that I were if I was looking at these young kind of elementary and preteen nieces and nephews and telling them that you're beautiful as you are, then like what am I doing? I
yeah,
I need
yeah.
to I need to kind of embody that as well. And so that was a decision that I made personal for myself, and that I made for because I wanted to, once again, a lot of it is like I wanted to be the example. And it was crazy because I had a lot of conversations about it,
Uh-huh.
and there were a lot of concerns by kind of coworkers and peers and friends when I said I'm like
Yeah.
I'm doing
Uh-huh.
that was they were really concerned. And now I feel like it's not a big, like, I don't know why that was such a question in my head before.
Right, right. And it's funny you brought that up because I read that somewhere, especially African American women, like
The
they
hard
don't go
conversation.
natural. Yeah, it's a hard
Yeah,
conversation, and they won't go natural because
yeah,
some people doesn't think it's professional enough.
yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a big piece of it, and I
Yeah.
still have I have friends and have et cetera that will. I mean, they feel like and I think in some settings and some careers, or I think it's harder. Like so, I yeah. So I but it was one of those things that I was like, no, I need this. If this is kind of who I am, I want to be true to myself. That it's a decision that I made, and I know sometimes I get reactions, and sometimes I get it, and I can tell. But I feel like me, and I feel like that's the most important thing.
I just love it. So how long did you go natural for?
So I mean, I think I started probably now it's wow, it's probably been 20 years. I mean, it's a long time that I've kind of gone natural, but I think that I've started wearing my hair kind of complete natural, probably 10 years now.
Wow. I just
Yeah.
absolutely love it, and I'm so glad you brought that up because for anybody listening to this, Anika, what do you want to say to them?
Just in general, I mean, I think part of what happens is that I think in many cases we are conditioned to believe that we're not enough, and we're conditioned that we have to fit into a certain specific mold in order to be successful. And um, I've never really bought into that concept. I don't feel like there is one way to do anything. I feel like there are multiple paths to get you there, and being true to yourself, being able to look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day, and being happy with the person that's looking back at you is kind of more, it's priceless. And so I think a big piece of this is really understanding what you want to do, but being okay with doing it on your own terms. Kind of
Yeah.
and understanding that if you have a vision, or if you have a thought of how things need to how you need to move through life, or things that you need to do, I would say take in the advice, but do what feels authentic to you. And I think that's important to do, because I think so many times, and I mean, and I'm no exception, that you kind of get into a point and you get talked in or convinced
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that kind of your intuition, or things that you innately feel are the right thing to do, are not. And you feel like, and feeling like you need to conform, or fit into a certain box in order to succeed. And I don't believe that.
No, I agree with you. I think our instincts tells us right away what we should do, but then we
Yeah.
go and we ask everybody. So one of the things I've been practicing for a couple of years now, if I need to make a decision, I make it with myself first. I sit down and I just think it through, and I see what solutions I come up with or what decision I come up with, and only then I go and talk to other people, because if I don't make that
Yeah.
decision first, I'm taking everybody else's
Yeah.
opinions. So I
Yeah.
wanted
Yeah.
to ask you about your values. What are your values, and how has your values shaped your leadership?
So, I mean, I think my values are core to my leadership. I believe in, I think, and so, and I kind of learned this more recently. I always used to say the golden rule, but now I've evolved and we've talked about this a lot in Wonder Nation. It's the platinum rule,
Mm,
and not necessarily treating others as you want to be treated, but treating others as they want to be treated,
mm,
because we're all very, very different. And just because my communication or things that I receive things in a certain way doesn't mean the next person. So a big part of me is I believe in being empathetic, and I believe that people and are kind of the biggest resource that we have, both personally and professionally. And so having kind of being kind of putting people at the center and kind of first, it's always going to be important. You will never go wrong if you do that. I do believe in having a strong work ethic and inclusive environment. I believe there's a difference between um, asking someone to participate and welcoming them into conversation. It's two very different things. And so when we have the conversation about having an inclusive and a diverse environment, it is giving people the permission and freedom to be themselves and to speak openly without. So I think those things are important. Really being able to meet people where they are,
wow.
and so those things how I kind of work with relationships externally, and how I work with my family and my friends.
Yeah.
And I kind of carry that forward too. And so I think what that makes it very much is that what you see is what you get. And so I don't think anyone will ever meet me and kind of feel that I'm different ever than kind of how I present.
Yeah. Wow. I just absolutely love what you said. Treat people the way they want to be treated, not just the way
Yes.
we want to be treated. Because I'll tell you what, there's a saying out there that the value we put on ourselves is the value the world will put on us.
Yeah.
And I love that. It so ties into what you just said. So, um, talk to us about your self care. What do you do for self care?
Oh,
Do you
buddy. So
have
this
time
is,
for self care? Like,
I
do you have a morning routine, for example?
so yes. And so I mean, I think my morning routine is journaling. And so I've got in the habit, and it's something just because I really do enjoy writing. And I had stopped it, but I think actually during COVID, I started it up again. And it's really just I don't have anything that is specific. Sometimes it's stream of consciousness, and it's like a long, long piece of it. Sometimes it's, kind of I'm grateful for X. And so, but it really is kind of this process of really just being with my thoughts, and committing it and putting it to paper. And so a lot of that, meditate, journal, and when I have time, I'll try to maybe do a walk or do something like that, just to get out and to clear my head for the morning, and to just have like a nice reset. Uh, but I must say that right now, balance and self care is where I'm working.
You're
I'm a
working
work
on it.
in progress.
So you got some, not all the plates are not spinning right now. Some plates
Right,
dropped.
right.
Okay. So what is, I know we talk about challenges, but this is a very vulnerable question. Like, what is your biggest fear? It could be personally or professionally.
Oh wow. Um,
I didn't give you
biggest
heads up for that one. I just
No, no, you didn't. But I think my biggest fear, I like when I pray, I kind of say, help me to become pray to, I always say, God help become the person you intended me to become. I think
yes.
partially, like my biggest fear is that I am not going to to reach my full potential.
Mm.
I think from a family perspective, my fear is, I think what we all have, that I kind of miss time. I want that time with my family. I want that time with my parents,
Yeah.
and just kind of those personal connections. And sometimes I fear that I've spent so much time kind of in kind of this work mode that you don't spend enough time in kind of the balance of enjoying and really taking that time to
Mm.
lean into those people and appreciate the people around you. And so um, I just kind of a fear of running out of time
Wow.
to do all of those things.
Well, it ties into the other one where you said, I'm fearful I won't be reaching my full potential. But it's also, I feel in talking to you, not just now, but before, I feel like you just want to be that person that leaves your mark and make an impact on this world.
I do. And I
Yeah.
do. And I think full potential doesn't necessarily have to necessarily even be, kind of professional. It's
Right.
like the
Right.
potential to be like this fully formed human being in
Yeah.
person. And so, and it is like, how do you show up for your family? How do you show up for
Yes.
your friends? How do you show up for kind of, finding that partner in life? And I think there are all of these different ways that you make your mark. And I think a lot of times we lean so much into professional, but I mean the people that you work with aren't going to be the people that are going to be crying at your funeral. It's going to be the
Right.
people
That's right.
that maybe they, I don't know, maybe, but I mean more likely than not, it's going to be that those family and those friends and those connections that you kind of cultivated outside of that
That's
that
right.
are so important. And I think that those are things that I want to make sure that I keep and make room for.
Yeah, I feel when we talk about legacy, a lot of times people think that legacy has to be wealth. And it's
Yeah,
not necessarily wealth. It's like you don't take
no,
anything with you. It's that when you go, who's going to be there?
yeah.
What are you going to say? I absolutely love that. So so you're okay talking about challenges and you're okay talking about fear. Let's see how you do with this next question.
Oh goodness,
What
goodness.
is
Okay,
your biggest accomplishment? Because a lot of people have a hard time with that one.
see that is. So I can
I
talk
see.
about anything other
I
than
know.
myself.
I know.
Uh,
I know.
my biggest accomplishment. I don't know. Hopefully I haven't had it yet. But today I think I think my biggest accomplishment is my network. I mean, the people and the relationships that I've been able to cultivate. I'm very proud and thankful for that. Like I've leaned into that, here as kind of presidency of WONDR Nation. I've leaned into it when I need things for family, and it's been cultivated over 20 plus years
Wow.
of kind of building those relationships and staying connected to people. And I think that's important, to be able to have those relationships. And I think that's something that early in my career, I was so focused on just doing a good job. And I would spend I would just be kind of hands down kind of it, on projects and pulling together and staying late and be the only one there and doing all this crazy stuff. And then kind of pulling back and kind of realizing that kind of those relationships. And so when I've gone through tough times and when, all these things, I realized that, kind of leaning in to that network of people. And I feel like that's priceless. And to be able to have, you know, I could be in Rome and there's someone that I know I could call. I
Yeah.
could be in Istanbul and I'm like, okay, who do I know? So I
Yeah.
do appreciate that, that I've been able to kind of make those connections. And I think for me, kind of having that network of people that I've mentored, that I've
Yeah.
seen kind of excel in their careers and kind of seeing and seeing kind of the opportunities that that we've been able to create for others. I think that's for me, what gives me the most sense of fulfillment.
I love it. I love it. So this has been so great. I feel I have so many questions and I feel like we can talk all day long about this. But I think I have another person I would like to have do a duel, have you and someone else on here. So
Okay.
I feel like it will be powerful. But do you have? And I have to say, you're so incredibly intelligent, and like just all the things you've accomplished, you've told me, and it will take us all day to talk about it. And it's such an honor to have you on here to share with us. But do you have a takeaway for our audience today?
I think the takeaway, and I think there are kind of two things I would kind of leave the audience with. And one is, I think I've kind of said it a few times that kind of you, like you are the your what you bring into the world is really kind of what your superpower is. And so I think lean into it. And so don't be afraid to be authentically who you are, and to really focus on some of those experiences, and to make sure that you feel that that you're bringing your authentic self. I think that's important. And I think the other thing is, to, and I always say this always, is to step outside of your comfort zone. I mean, a lot of things to seem scary from the outside, but
Yeah.
it's not until you kind of lean into it and go through it, that you realize that maybe it's tough, but it's much, much better on the other side. And so I would say, don't limit yourself, and kind of take risks, kind of lean into opportunities, to learn and to grow.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And what I have heard today is that legacy is not necessarily wealth,
Yeah,
money and wealth and all of that. Legacy can be your network, because your network could be your net worth. So, with that, it's a wrap.
thank you.